The man who found love between sets. The morning Maya asked him if he was already taken, Daniel realized that sometimes the person who sees you at your most ordinary is the person who sees you most clearly. Daniel Torres was 41 years old, a furniture restoration specialist who spent his days bringing broken chairs and scarred tables back to something beautiful. He worked out of a warehouse studio on the east side of Portland, the kind of space with concrete floors and industrial windows that let in gray northwest light all afternoon. His marriage had ended 4 years earlier in the quiet way marriages sometimes do, not with explosions but with the slow realization that two people had become roommates who happened to share a mortgage. His ex-wife had moved to Denver for work, and Daniel had signed the divorce papers at a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning without much ceremony. He wasn't angry, just tired. He had gone through a slow dissolution with a woman who loved the idea of a creative man until creativity looked too much like wood shavings on the floor and late nights in the workshop. It was a Tuesday in early November when Maya Chen walked up to him between sets at the gym and asked the question that would change everything. Daniel had been going to the same 24-hour fitness center for 3 years, always at 5:30 in the morning before work, and Maya had been showing up at the same time for the past 8 months. She was 37, worked as a project manager for a tech company, and had the kind of quiet competence that made Daniel think she could probably run a small country if someone asked her to. She wore her black hair in a practical ponytail, had a collection of faded band t-shirts she cycled through, and possessed the rare ability to spot someone on a bench press without making it awkward. They'd started as the kind of gym acquaintances who nod and exchange weather observations, then graduated to actual conversations about workout splits and protein powder, and eventually became something like friends who happened to lift weights in the same general vicinity 3 mornings a week. Daniel liked her immediately. She was funny without trying, honest in a way most people weren't, and had once told him his deadlift form was terrible with such casual directness that he'd actually laughed. On this particular Tuesday, Daniel was finishing his last set of shoulder presses when Maya appeared beside the rack with 2 water bottles, one of which she handed to him without asking. The gym was mostly empty at this hour, just a handful of regulars scattered across the equipment and a morning news program playing silently on the television mounted in the corner. "I have a question," Maya said, sitting down on the bench beside him. Daniel took the water bottle and wiped his face with a towel. "If it's about whether I'm finally going to fix my deadlift form, the answer is probably not. It's not about your deadlift." Maya twisted the cap off her own bottle and took a long drink, and Daniel noticed she seemed slightly nervous, which was unusual for her. "It's more personal than that." Daniel felt something shift in the air between them. "Okay, what's the question?" Maya looked at him directly, the way she always did when she was about to say something she'd thought through carefully. "Why don't you ever date anyone?" Daniel blinked. Of all the questions he'd expected, that wasn't one of them. "That's what you want to know? I've known you for 8 months. We talk 3 times a week. You've told me about your work, your divorce, your terrible coffee habit, your opinion on every protein bar brand currently on the market. But you've never once mentioned dating anyone. Not a single date. Not even a bad Tinder story. So I'm curious. Why?" Daniel set his water bottle down and leaned back against the bench. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Portland was waking up slowly under a blanket of November clouds. A bus rolled past. A cyclist in a rain jacket pedaled through the intersection. The gym smelled like rubber mats and industrial cleaner and the faint hint of someone's coconut shampoo. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "I guess I'm just not looking." "Most people who say they're not looking are actually looking but pretending they're not." Maya smiled slightly. "You seem like you're genuinely not looking. Is that a bad thing? It's just unusual. You're 41, not 70. You're not terrible looking. You have a job and a personality, and you can hold a conversation about things other than cryptocurrency. In the current dating landscape, that makes you basically a unicorn." Daniel laughed. "I think you're overestimating my market value." "I don't think I am." Maya paused, and Daniel saw her twist the cap back onto her water bottle twice before unscrewing it again, a nervous gesture he'd never seen her make before. "Unless you're already taken?" The question hung in the air between them. It was phrased casually, but there was something underneath it, something careful and vulnerable that made Daniel's pulse pick up even though he'd just finished a workout. "I'm not taken," Daniel said quietly. "Oh." Maya looked down at her hands. "Okay. Why are you asking?" Maya didn't answer right away. She stood up, walked over to the water fountain, filled her bottle even though it was already mostly full, and came back. When she sat down again, she looked at Daniel with an expression that was half nervous and half determined. "Because I've been trying to figure out for the last 3 months whether you're interested in me or if I'm completely misreading the situation," Maya said. And I'm not usually the kind of person who misread situations, but with you I honestly can't tell. So I'm just gonna ask directly because that's apparently what I do now. Are you interested in me? Daniel felt like someone had pressed pause on the entire gym. The rowing machine stopped squeaking. The treadmills stopped humming. The morning news anchor froze mid-sentence. He looked at Maya, at the way she was sitting perfectly still like she was bracing for impact, and realized with sudden clarity that he'd been interested in her since approximately the third week they'd known each other and had spent the last 6 months telling himself it didn't mean anything. Yes, Daniel said. Maya exhaled. Okay, good. That's good. I thought we were just friends. We are friends, but I'd like to be more than friends. If you're open to that. Maya's voice was steady, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. And if you're not, that's fine. I can handle rejection like an adult. Probably. I've never actually been rejected by someone I see 3 times a week at 5:30 in the morning, so this could get awkward, but I'm willing to risk it. Daniel smiled. You're not getting rejected. I'm not? No. Daniel reached out and touched her hand, just briefly, his fingers brushing across her knuckles. I'm just trying to figure out how I spent 8 months working out next to you without realizing this was going somewhere. To be fair, we were both pretty focused on our respective workout splits. Maya turned her hand over so her palm was facing up, and Daniel took it without thinking. Her hand was warm and slightly calloused from lifting, and holding it felt like the most natural thing in the world. So what happens now? I guess we go on a date, Daniel said. A real date? Not just meeting here at 5:30 and talking between sets? A real date. With a restaurant and everything. Maya grinned. I didn't know you had it in you, Torres. I'm full of surprises. Clearly. Maya squeezed his hand once and then let go, standing up and slinging her gym bag over her shoulder. I have to get to work. But text me later and we'll figure out the details. Daniel watched her walk toward the locker room, and just before she disappeared through the door, she turned around and called back. And for the record, I've been interested since week 2. You were just slow. Week 2? Daniel shouted after her. What happened in week 2? You helped me load plates onto the leg press and didn't mansplain how to use it. Maya's laugh echoed across the gym. Low bar, I know, but you cleared it. Daniel sat there for a solid 2 minutes after she left, staring at the spot where she'd been standing and trying to process what had just happened. He'd come to the gym expecting a normal Tuesday morning workout, and he was leaving with a date and the strange, unsettling feeling that his entire life had just shifted sideways into something new. Their first actual date happened on Friday evening at a small Italian restaurant in Maya's neighborhood, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and handwritten menus and bread baskets that arrived warm. Daniel showed up 10 minutes early wearing a button-down shirt he'd ironed specifically for this occasion, and when Maya walked in wearing a dark green sweater and jeans, he stood up like he was meeting someone important for the first time. You look nice, Maya said, sliding into the seat across from him. So do you. Daniel handed her the menu, even though they were both still holding their own. This is weird, right? We've had like 50 conversations and now suddenly we're on a date and I don't know what to talk about. Talk about the same things we always talk about, except now we're doing it with wine and pasta instead of dumbbells and questionable gym showers. Daniel relaxed. Okay, I can do that. They ordered food and talked about work. Maya told him about a project launch that had gone sideways when the client changed their requirements 3 days before delivery. Daniel told her about a 1940s dining table he was restoring that had water damage so extensive he'd basically had to rebuild the entire surface. The conversation flowed the way it always did, easy and natural, and by the time their entrees arrived, Daniel had forgotten to be nervous. Can I ask you something? Maya said, twirling pasta around her fork. You already asked me something this week. Pretty big something, actually. Maya smiled. This one's smaller. Why furniture restoration? You've never actually told me how you ended up doing that. Daniel cut into his chicken and thought about how to answer. My grandfather was a carpenter. Old school craftsman, built things by hand, didn't trust power tools. When I was a kid, I'd spend weekends in his workshop watching him work. He died when I was 15, and my parents were going to sell all his tools, but I asked if I could keep them. Taught myself how to use them. Started fixing broken furniture for neighbors. Turned into a business eventually. That's a good origin story. What about you? How does someone end up as a tech project manager? Failed chemistry degree, stint in retail management, desperate job application to a startup that somehow turned into a career. Maya shrugged. Not as romantic as yours, but it pays the bills and I'm good at it. You're good at a lot of things. Careful, Torres. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was a compliment. Maya set down her fork and looked at him with an expression that was softer than her usual directness. You know what I like about you? My terrible deadlift form? Besides that, Maya leaned forward slightly. You don't try to be anyone other than who you are. You're not performing. You're not trying to impress me. You're just you. And I've dated enough men who spend the entire first date trying to sell me on a version of themselves that doesn't actually exist. It's exhausting. You're not exhausting. Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest. I'm going to take that as the highest compliment I've ever received. You should. Maya picked up her wine glass. Here's to not being exhausting. Daniel clinked his glass against hers. I'll drink to that. After dinner, they walked through Maya's neighborhood even though it was raining, sharing an umbrella that was slightly too small and required them to walk closer together than strictly necessary. Maya pointed out her favorite coffee shop, the bookstore where she'd bought half her current reading pile, the park where she ran on weekends when she wasn't at the gym. Daniel told her about the vintage record store 3 blocks from his workshop, the taco truck that parked outside on Thursdays, the stretch of riverfront trail he biked when he needed to clear his head. When they reached Maya's building, they stood under the awning by the front entrance, rain drumming on the canvas above their heads. Maya handed Daniel the umbrella and dug through her bag for her keys. This was nice, she said. It was. Daniel hesitated. Can I see you again? I'll see you Tuesday at the gym, but can I see you again before that? Maya smiled. You could see me tomorrow if you want. Tomorrow works. Good. Maya found her keys and unlocked the front door, but she didn't go inside. Instead, she turned back to Daniel and stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and clean that reminded him of rain and citrus. Can I tell you something? Yeah. I'm really glad I asked you that question on Tuesday, because I was about 90% sure you were going to say you weren't interested, and I was preparing myself to find a new gym and possibly a new city to avoid the awkwardness. Daniel laughed softly. You weren't going to change cities. You don't know that. I'm very committed to avoiding awkward situations. Maya reached up and touched the collar of his shirt, a small gesture that made Daniel's heart rate spike. But I'm glad I didn't have to. Me too, Daniel said, and then he kissed her. It was a careful kiss, the kind of first kiss that asks permission even as it's happening, but Maya kissed him back with enough certainty that Daniel stopped worrying about whether he was doing it right. Her hand moved from his collar to the back of his neck, and his hand found the small of her back, and they stood there under the awning kissing in the rain like they were characters in a movie neither of them would normally watch. When they finally pulled apart, Maya was smiling. Okay, that was worth the 8-month wait. Only 8 months? I'm counting from when I first thought about kissing you, which was approximately month 1. Maya stepped back toward her door. Text me tomorrow. We'll figure out where to have our second date. Will do. Daniel watched her disappear into the building, and then he walked back through the rain to his car with the umbrella forgotten in his hand and a smile he couldn't seem to wipe off his face. Over the next 3 months, Daniel and Maya fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as their gym routine. They still met at 5:30 on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings, but now they also had Friday dinners and Sunday brunches and occasional midweek coffee dates that turned into long conversations about nothing in particular. Maya met Daniel's friends and charmed them without effort. Daniel met Maya's sister and somehow ended up helping her move furniture on a Saturday afternoon while Maya supervised with coffee and commentary. The relationship worked because they'd been friends first, because they already knew each other's patterns and quirks and communication styles. Daniel learned that Maya was deeply pragmatic about most things but had a secret sentimental streak that emerged at random moments. Maya learned that Daniel was quieter than most people but always listening, always paying attention to the small details that others missed. In February, Maya's ex-fiancé showed up at her apartment unannounced on a Sunday morning, wanting to talk about closure. His name was Brett, he worked in finance, and he had the kind of smooth confidence that came from never being told no. Daniel happened to be there making coffee when the buzzer rang, and he watched through the kitchen doorway as Maya stood in her living room telling Brett in no uncertain terms that they had nothing left to discuss. I just think we ended things too quickly, Brett said, leaning against the wall like he owned the place. We were good together, Maya. We could be good again. We weren't good together, Maya said flatly. You wanted someone who'd rearrange her entire life around your career. I wanted a partner, not a project manager position in my own relationship. That's not fair. It's completely fair. Maya crossed her arms. And even if it wasn't, I'm seeing someone now. So this conversation is over. Brett's eyes flickered toward the kitchen where Daniel was very obviously standing with a coffee mug in his hand. Him? Yes, him. His name is Daniel. And you need to leave. Brett straightened up and Daniel saw the exact moment his smooth confidence cracked into something uglier. Really? The guy making coffee in your kitchen at 10 Ma'am, that's who you replaced me with? Daniel set down his coffee mug and walked into the living room. He wasn't particularly tall or intimidating, but he'd spent 20 years working with his hands, and it showed in the way he carried himself. "She didn't replace you," Daniel said calmly. "She upgraded." "Big difference." Brett's jaw tightened. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the person who's going to ask you politely to leave, and if you don't leave, I'm the person who's going to call the building security and have you removed less politely." Maya stepped between them, one hand on Daniel's chest. "Brett, go. We're done. We've been done for over a year. Move on." Brett looked at Maya, then at Daniel, and whatever he saw there made him realize he'd already lost. He grabbed his jacket from the couch and headed for the door, but he couldn't resist one last parting shot. "You're making a mistake." "No," Maya said quietly. "I made a mistake when I agreed to marry you. This is me fixing it." The door slammed. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Maya turned around and looked at him with an expression that was half exasperated and half amused. "Sorry you had to witness that," she said. "Don't apologize. I'm just impressed you didn't punch him." "I considered it." Maya walked over and wrapped her arms around Daniel's waist, pressing her face against his chest. "Thank you for the backup." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Anytime. Though for the record, you had it handled before I even opened my mouth." "I know. But it's nice to have someone in my corner anyway." They stood there in the middle of her living room holding each other while the morning light streamed through the windows and the coffee maker beeped in the kitchen. Daniel thought about Brett, about the kind of man who showed up uninvited and expected to be welcomed back, and felt grateful that Maya had the strength to choose differently. 6 months after their first date, Daniel asked Maya to move in with him. They were sitting on his workshop floor on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished furniture projects, eating takeout sushi straight from the containers. Maya had come by to drop off lunch and ended up staying for 3 hours, asking questions about the dresser he was refinishing and offering opinions on stain colors. "Move in with me," Daniel said suddenly. Maya looked up from her California roll. "What?" "Move in with me. Your lease is up in 2 months. You're at my place 4 nights a week anyway. It makes sense." "Daniel Torres, are you asking me to cohabitate based on logistical efficiency?" "I'm asking you to cohabitate because I love you and I want to wake up next to you every morning instead of just most mornings." Maya set down her sushi. "You love me?" "Yes." Daniel realized he'd never actually said it out loud before, and now that he had, he couldn't understand why he'd waited so long. "I love you. I've loved you since you told me my deadlift form was terrible and I should probably get a coach before I hurt myself. Maybe even before that." Maya laughed and Daniel saw that her eyes were wet. "That's the least romantic declaration of love I've ever heard." "Probably. But it's true." "Well, for the record, I love you too. And yes, I'll move in with you. But only if you promise to finally fix your deadlift form." "Deal," Daniel said, and kissed her right there on the workshop floor with sawdust in their hair and soy sauce on their hands. Maya moved in 8 weeks later on a rainy Sunday in September, and Daniel's house stopped feeling like a place he lived alone and started feeling like home. They painted the guest bedroom together and turned it into Maya's office. They adopted a dog from the shelter, a 3-year-old mutt named Captain who had anxiety issues and an irrational fear of the mail carrier. They kept going to the gym at 5:33 mornings a week, and sometimes Daniel would look over at Maya doing bicep curls and think about that Tuesday morning when she'd asked him if he was already taken, and feel grateful she'd been brave enough to ask. A year later, Daniel proposed in the most obvious place possible, the gym. It was a Tuesday morning, 5:30 a.m. The same spot where Maya had first asked him why he never dated anyone. He'd planned something more elaborate, maybe a nice dinner or a weekend trip, but when they finished their workout and Maya sat down on the bench with her water bottle, Daniel looked at her and realized he didn't want to wait another day. He got down on one knee right there between the weight racks and the treadmills. "What are you doing?" Maya asked. Daniel pulled the ring box from his gym bag. "Proposing. Obviously." "Obviously," Maya repeated and started laughing. "You're proposing to me at the gym. It's where we met. It's where you asked me if I was already taken. It's where this whole thing started." Daniel opened the box. "So yeah, I'm proposing to you at the gym. Maya Chen, will you marry me?" Maya looked at the ring, then at Daniel, then back at the ring. "Yes. Obviously yes. But I need you to know that this is the most ridiculous proposal story I'm ever going to have to tell people." "I can live with that," Daniel said and slipped the ring onto her finger. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a botanical garden in Portland, with Maya's sister as maid of honor and Daniel's best friend from college as best man. Captain was the ring bearer and did a surprisingly good job despite his general anxiety about life. Maya wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Daniel wore a suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion and cried when he saw her walking down the aisle, which surprised exactly no one who knew him. During the reception, Maya's sister gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. She talked about how Maya had come home from the gym one morning and announced she was going to ask her workout partner out because she was tired of waiting for him to make the first move. She talked about how Daniel was the first man Maya had ever dated who treated her like an equal instead of a prize to be won. And she ended by saying that if Daniel ever broke her sister's heart, she knew where he worked and had access to heavy machinery.